but feel free to ask questions whilst I'm talking. So, the concept behind this talk was, I continue to get asked, are we actually testing in an Agile? Are we Agile testers? What is this Agile stuff that we talk about? So, what I wanted to do was just sort of strip back to a core number of principles that if you're, and I've done it from the perspective of a tester, and you're looking at a project and they're saying that they're Agile, are they Agile? What does it actually mean to you? So we'll go through these. If we don't go through all the slides, it doesn't matter, it'll be up on the website, have a look, have a read through it. There's lots of fine print in there which I will not be reading out or I will not be going into. But it's there as a reference. So, let's just start with a little bit of, just think about something. Take yourselves out of this room and out of the noise down there, and you're back in the office, and see if you recognise any of these sort of statements. All of these are prefixed by, we are Agile because. We are Agile because we do a daily stand-up. We are Agile because we sit next to the developers. We're Agile because we do some testing every iteration or every sprint. Cool. We're Agile because our requirements are written up front, our developers do some work, and we test it, but we do this in 2 weeks. I noticed a few chuckles going around. Can I just have some hands up for people who recognise some of those sorts of... Yeah, good. Okay. I would argue that people are adopting some Agile practices, but if you're thinking about running a true Agile project or program, no, that's not Agile. Okay, there's one slide missing from this. What I'd suggest, I had a phrase up there that quoted from a chap called Gojko Ajic. Now Gojko does a lot of talks around specification by example, test-driven approaches to development. Very knowledgeable, very intuitive guy. And at the Berlin Agile Testing Days conference, he came up with this one phrase which suddenly clicked for me about Agile. He said, adopt the principles. Now, for those of you who don't know, with Agile there is a manifesto. That manifesto has 4 statements. They're there. I'm not going to show you them. They're well touted. You can look them up on the internet. You can have a look at the slides. And underpinning that manifesto is principles. There are 12 Agile principles. So when he says adopt the principles, he's talking about adopting these 12 principles. Not partially doing a bit, not doing this bit or this. The reason why I use the model of a tree is because to me it emphasises the nature of missing bits out. If you think of a tree analogy, the principles can be that your roots in. If you start chopping off your roots, your tree will either starve, fall over, kill somebody, cause you problems, give you a load of grief, and then you go back to doing what you did before. It's not hard. Those principles are simple statements. There's no big paragraphs, there's no book about this. There are plenty of books out there, but the actual principles themselves are 12 statements. Think about those statements. I would always recommend that if you're working somewhere and they're saying, right, we're going to go Agile, prompt the question in your very first sprint on the first day and say, can we spend 1 hour, just 1 hour, going through each of these 12 principles and how we're going to adopt that within our project. The excuse of, oh no, that's too hard, we won't do that, will require you to go back and ask the question, no, how do we do it? It may be hard, but how do we do it? One of the things around that, going to a more agile delivery approach, is that it is actually quite hard. A lot of people quote and talk about the intuitive nature of Agile, and that's true. It's very intuitive, particularly if you've grown up with Agile. Now, there's a lot of graduates and people in the testing industry who've been around for 2 or 3 years. All they've ever known is Agile. They don't actually know what a sequential delivery model looks like. They don't know what waterfall is. They don't know what quality gates are. They don't understand defect tracking over 7 or 8 month periods to look for trends. They don't understand the need for S-curves. It's a complete and utter mind shift. Now, I say sit down and talk to the guys when you're doing it. One of the other points that I want to pull out of this presentation right at this point is that the only person that can change in a project is you. I've done change management, I've done change programs with large organisations. You can influence people, you can cajole, persuade, talk to people, but until each individual person actually takes up the challenge and say, how can I change? What do I need to do about this? That you will actually get a change. It's down to the individual. So even if you can act as a catalyst to prompt other people to think about these principles, get them to do that. Now, as a tester, when you come into this whole new world, actually, there's nothing in here that actually really talks about testing. You get the likes of Google, who now run agile approaches, and they say, we have no testers in our organisation. May or may not agree with that, but that's what they quote. What they do say, and a lot of organisations that are running very strong agile practices, they say, we have groups of agile practitioners. Within that group of agile practitioners, we have people who have specialist knowledge. We have some testers who are either fantastically technical, who have strong business knowledge, or are very, very good at designing tech. We have people who are very good at coding. We have people who are very good at understanding what the business needs. But these people only play those roles within that team for part of the time. I would argue that in a well-run agile team, at some point, you may have nobody actively doing any test role in that team. At other points, you may have all 10 or 12 people in your agile team doing some testing. The other thing that we don't talk about within agile is QA. Jonathan's laughing at me because he knows that this is one of my hobby courses. The argument I have around QA and the label given to people around QA is quality. That's the first thing that people ever hear. Now, if there was a fire alarm to go off in here and somebody walked in with a fluorescent jacket on and said, please leave the building using that access door there, please. Even though it says no access, I bet you most of us would actually go for that door and go out. Now, we're not taking this person as a strong leader. We don't know them for toffee. We've never met them. But because they're wearing that fluorescent jacket, they're wearing the label of fire warden, we will listen to them and follow them out the door. The danger with using the title quality is what tends to happen, people go, oh, it's his responsibility or her responsibility. They are the ones responsible for quality. In an agile project, you do not have time for any one person to own quality. Quality is the responsibility of the team. You as a tester and your role shifts. Because you don't have time to do all of the testing that you would love to do. I mean, there's the old adage of testing only ever is stopped, it never finishes. You give a group of people a reasonably complex product and time to think about their testing and run it, they will run it for month upon month upon month. Does it add value? Different debate. But you've got to be careful about titles and what you're there to do. And with testing, you only have 2 weeks. And you've got a limited period of time to do your regression testing. If you're lucky. There's some organisations that are now releasing patches on a daily basis. They prioritise and review what they're doing. They do some testing, and within 24 hours, they're doing a dev build test release cycle. So things are speeding up. And testing in the old-fashioned sense is having to change with these approaches. Now what that then means, and the solution and the challenge to test, and actually what makes it really good fun now, and changes testing from being a commodity-driven approach to actually needing good people, is that you try and prevent defects. What can you do up front to prevent yourself finding faults, defects, bugs? They're wasted. By the time you found the defect, it's too late. The question I now ask an Agile team, if they say, oh yeah, we've raised over 500 defects in the past 2 months, I say that's appalling. That's 500 defects you could have prevented. What are you doing? So hence where we come in with the test-driven approaches, which are all about structuring your tests up front, getting your developers to do something that actually is possibly a bit controversial. Get them to check their code. There's a big argument in the marketplace now that differentiates between testing and checking. Think about a lot of the testing that people do. Is it actually sort of seriously technical, complicated testing, or is it mainly checking? Can I log in? Does this field appear on my screen? Can I enter a value in this field and press enter? That's not testing, that's checking your work. How many people here, before they send out an email, will reread it just to check for spelling mistakes? Yeah? So we don't write an email, then give it to somebody else and say, check that. Why do I want to do this mundane task when I, as a person, can do that? It then lifts, again, the challenge for testers. What are you going to do about preventing defect, and how can you do this? Different approaches, I'm not going to go through all of them. So, as you go up the tree, you've got the principles, the manifesto. So again, if you chop out any one of those 4 statements that are in there, you're snookered. You've just cut a huge chunk out of your tree. If you think of it as a building, oh, I've taken one of the 4 corners of my building out. Never wonder why it might fall apart. So all of this information is freely available. You just type in Agile Manifesto in Google, up it comes, it's 1 page. I've taken a screenshot of that page, and it's easy to read. There's no excuse. There's no excuse for reading. Understanding and then understanding what it really means, great, there's some good challenges in there, but think about it. Then the next one is the project approach. There is no point in talking about being agile if your project manager insists that you are going to be micromanaged. He wants to know your detailed resource plan for the next 6 months, wants to know all of the tasks that you're going to do, which dates you're going to do them on, and wants a quality plan to follow that through with quality entry and exit gate. You might as well forget it at that point. So this brings me on to the next point about Agile. Agile is not a test-driven approach, it's not a development-driven approach. It has to be an organisational approach. Because suddenly you're changing expectations. I had a classic example of that today in a meeting where